So we made the decision to use InSoFast on the inside of a house in Texas. It's a cinder block home that was built in the 80s, and we were looking for a solution that would allow us to use sheetrock as an interior finish, and we found the InSoFast solution and thought that it really just fit all of our needs. Not only did it provide insulation, but it also would allow us to do the interior finishes that we were looking for. So did a lot of looking around online, and the best that I could find were a bunch of videos from InSoFast. They're super helpful. They give a lot of detail, but I couldn't find any videos from someone that had used it in the wild. So I thought I'd put this video together to give some of the things that I've learned about it, some of the maybe little tips and tricks that might help you. That when a company does something every day, sometimes it's easy for them to forget some of the smaller details maybe that the novice would need some help on. So let's go through some of those. So this wall in front of us here is a wall that has been completely done with InSoFast. We've got all the wiring in it. This is actually a kitchen wall, so it's going to have a number of plugs. Our countertop plugs here. The stove will go here. You can see where we've run the 220 for the stove. So the InSoFast has built-in chases, wiring and plumbing chases, and for the most part they work really great. It certainly gives you something to use, which you may not find with some of the other stuff, you know, if you just use foam board or something like that from Lowe's. But one of the things that I want to point out, so here we've got a vertical chase, and then running this way there's a horizontal chase in this panel. These two panels are put together here. But what I found when I was running the wire is that it was easier just to cut out a small section of the InSoFast, so that way when you're running the wire this way you can come down, especially when you have to put an outlet in the center of a panel. But even then, it was just easier to cut it out than try to snake it through and then do a bend. I tried doing it multiple ways, so putting a panel up, letting that cure, then running the wire, then trying to put another panel on top of it. That works okay, but the problem is the wire tends to want to push this next panel out just a little bit. So I found that it was easier, as InSoFast recommends, going ahead and gluing all of the panels on there and then running your wiring. Now the only place that I didn't do that was some plumbing. And I'll show you over here where we've got the rough end for the sink. Our plumbing runs down here, and I went ahead and pre-measured everything to make sure that when I was gonna put the InSoFast that it was gonna line up the best I could with the existing chases. Now we have a 3/4 inch supply line here, and it's cold water, so it breaks off and brings our cold water to the sink, but it also exits outside for an outside spigot. The chases in the InSoFast don't really allow for that 3/4 inch PEX. About the most you can fit in there is a 1/2 inch PEX. I just did a standoff here to bring it down, but then when I pre-measured everything, I just measured for the 1/2 inch PEX to follow the chases. So I found it a lot easier to go ahead and do the plumbing and then put the InSoFast up. So what I did in this particular case is I ran all of the plumbing, all of the rough-in plumbing. I glued this one to the wall, made sure all my plumbing was right the way I wanted it. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a masonry nail here. Sometimes the panels do want to push off the wall just a little bit. Most times that's not the case. There's almost like a vacuum created once you put it up against the wall. But I did find in a couple of cases, particularly in areas where the wall was not completely plumb, that the best way to fasten it so that way I could continue working was just to use a simple masonry nail through the stud, and that seemed to hold it really well. Let me show you a box of those. So these are the masonry nails that I use, just 2.5 inch masonry nails. They're a heavier nail than just a traditional framing nail. That may not zoom in, but it's actually got some flutes on it or some ribbing maybe is a better way to describe it. But anyway, these work really well. So just use them like a traditional nail. It'll nail through the plastic stud. Once you get to the masonry, you'll know it. And you've really got to beat on them pretty hard to get them to go. But they work really well for sort of a temporary fastening solution. So that way, as I said here, you know, we've got this PEX plumbing, and the PEX is, though it's somewhat flexible, if your wall isn't perfect, it's going to want to push the panels off of the wall. So you want to make sure that you've got good wall contact there. So that's how we did that. So when you're working with the InSoFast, you want to make sure that you don't have any things sticking out from the wall. You want to make sure that the wall itself is as flat as possible. Here we had a coax cable coming out of the wall, and they siliconed around it. So you want to make sure that you pull all of that out. You want to get rid of all of that, just to make sure that when the InSoFast goes up against the wall, it's as flat as you can make it, so that way you've got good glue contact. Obviously that's what's holding not only the InSoFast to the wall, but also the sheetrock and pictures and whatever else goes on top of that. So you want to make sure that the wall's nice and flat. So now when it comes to inside and outside corners, you can do it a couple of different ways. InSoFast has some details with respect to how to do inside and outside corners. They're printed on their boxes. The primary method that they're using for inside and outside corners is to use a piece of sheet metal, or flashing really, bent at a 90-degree angle, and you would just glue it in this corner. Holding it down with duct tape, glue the back of it, stick it on. And then when you go to put your sheetrock on, that flashing will hold a sheetrock nail. That's okay, and it probably works great. Obviously, all of the details that I found so far, there wasn't one that InSoFast didn't have an answer to. However, flashing, you know, it's pretty thin. It's usually 26 gauge steel, and sheetrock is prone to screw popping anyway. So I did it a little bit differently here in particular, and then I'll show you the way that I did it based on some of their other details. So all that to say, I chose not to use the flashing method just because I was concerned that it wasn't going to hold the sheetrock nails, or the sheetrock screws rather, as tightly as I wanted them to. So in this example, what I did is I ended up cutting all of the panels so that way the stud was on the inside corner. And on this one right here, there's actually 2 inches of foam that goes behind this panel. So I started at that wall. I started on this wall rather, and so butted it all the way up against the wall with 2 inches of foam. And so that way when I put this one, these studs would line up in the corner. It takes a lot of work to do that. You end up wasting a lot of square footage as far as the InSoFast, because you're cutting off part of a panel, and you probably won't reuse that one. Let me show you some of the other problems that creates as you're doing something like that. So you can see here, because of the way I cut that other panel, it threw off the spacing on everything else. And you can see I ended up having to do two studs back to back. And you know, you think the waste is only going to happen on one side, but it tends to happen on both sides because you're trying to get it lined up. You want to make sure that your studs are at the very minimum 16 on center. So in order to do that, you end up with 2 studs next to each other and the drop on the other side. So that created more problems than it was really worth, and to be quite honest, wasted a lot of money. I thought it would be easier, and I thought I could get away without doing the other corner detail that I'll show you here in just a second. So learn from my mistakes, don't do it that way. So on this piece, we have an inside corner here, and then we have an outside corner here. What I've been doing is starting out with the 2x4s. So this one is glued, I've got a couple of screws just to hold the two pieces together, but then I've also got a masonry nail holding this 2x4 in place until the glue dries. And those masonry nails can stay, there's no reason to pull those out. That being said, that only gives us 1.5 inches of thickness. What InSoFast recommends is ripping down a piece of plywood, 1/2 inch plywood, and putting it on top of here so you have your full 2 inches worth of thickness. So I started that method, but here's the problem that I found. Your walls, when you stick the InSoFast to the wall, because the walls are typically not perfectly plumb, or at least mine weren't, what you end up with is some variation in thickness where the InSoFast meets the wall. So your outside thickness of the InSoFast, including the glue in the wall, in some cases ends up being a little over 2 inches. And as you can imagine, when you have a dip or a belly in the wall, in areas you're going to be over 2 inches, and in some areas you're going to be under 2 inches. Because when you put this on the wall, you're ending up with more of a straight edge than the original wall. What I found is that can create some problems. So let me show you what I've done and how I build up after I put the InSoFast in. So you can see in this example here, this is a window opening. So we've got the cinder block here, we've got my 2x4, and you can see there's a fairly decent gap here just because the wall was not completely plumb. So what I started doing was using 1/2 inch plywood, and what I noticed was the 1/2 inch plywood added too much thickness, so my InSoFast was not flush with it. This is an old house, and a lot of the interior walls had wood paneling on them. So what I started doing was taking two pieces of that wood paneling, just that thin wood paneling, and putting them together. Each piece is just a little bit over 1/8 inch. They're kind of an odd size. For the build-up, I found that was the easiest way, and I found that it was better once I put my 2x4s on, go ahead and put the InSoFast, and then you can determine what gap you need to fill to make everything flush, so that way when you screw your sheetrock, when you hang your sheetrock, everything fits really nice. I'm going to show you another area, I hope it shows up, but where I ended up having to use three layers of this to make up the gap. And again, InSoFast recommends using 1/2 inch plywood and just ripping it down. That sounds like a great solution, but you have so many variances. Putting a piece of plywood up on its end and running it through a table saw, don't do that. Don't do that. Just buy some cheap wood paneling at the home improvement store. You can rip that down and build up whatever thicknesses you need to make it work right. So here is an area where there was some variation. So what I did is I ended up using 3 pieces of the wood paneling ripped down just to make up that gap. So this piece right here stuck out just a little bit more than the rest of the InSoFast did. So I've got 2 panels here, 2 pieces here, and then a 3rd piece here, just to round out that gap just a little bit, and that worked really good. One other thing that I'll point out here, sheetrock is fairly forgiving. So if you have an area that is not absolutely completely flush, it's okay. You do want to get it as close as possible within probably 1/16 of an inch or so, maybe a little bit. There may be a little bit more wiggle room in there than that, but the sheetrock will form with some variation. So don't get too uptight about it. But this was the best way I found to do it, and to be quite honest, it's been the most efficient way. So does InSoFast work? It works fantastic. It was the solution that we had been looking for to do the interior finishes on exterior cinder block walls. So this is not in a basement, this is all above grade. We had looked at stucco, doing stucco on the inside of the house, and while it was fairly pricey, and by the time we're all said and done, it'll be close to what we'll have in the InSoFast plus the sheetrock. But doing stucco on the inside of the house, you're gonna have cracking, you're gonna have some spalling and that sort of thing, and we didn't care for that solution particularly. So cinder block walls, and I may be off a little bit here, but in the research that I did, cinder block walls unfilled provided less than 1 R value of insulation value. With the InSoFast panels, we're getting R8.5. So with the cinder block, let's just round it off and call it an R value of 10 on the walls. So with the InSoFast, not only did we get the interior finish that we wanted, which was sheetrock, but we also got an insulative value. In addition to that, we're not going to have the maintenance that we would with stucco. One of the things that's not talked about, and I was a little bit curious about this from the very beginning, you know, houses, as they expand and contract, they creak a little bit. You've got wood members in there, you've got sheetrock, you've got multiple building materials that expand and contract at different rates. So you're always going to have some creaking in the house. And one of the things that I was really curious about was when you put a bunch of styrofoam, we all know that styrofoam creaks, especially when it's rubbed together. And the way these joints work, they basically fit together like Lego bricks. I was a little bit concerned, is it going to creak? And the answer is yes, it does. Is it more than a normal house? I don't think so. The house that we live in, not this home, but another home, stick built, same sort of vintage of house, I think it creaks about the same. I've spent a lot of time in this house at different times of the day, really hot days, really cool days, and it creaks about the same. Are the creaks a little bit different? Yes, they are, but not anything more than what you would expect from any other type of construction where you've got dissimilar materials mated together that are going to expand and contract at different rates. So far it's been a really great solution for us. I like how easy it is. It's important to keep in mind in some of the InSoFast videos, at least the ones that I watched, a lot of the preparatory work is already done when they're putting up the panels. I think there's one video where it shows them putting up an entire wall of InSoFast in 10 or 15 minutes or something like that. It can be done. What they're not showing is the preparation work for the corners, for any windows, for any doors that you may have, for any plug extensions that you're going to have to do. Because keep in mind, your plugs are all going to have to be moved out. So there may be some instances, I haven't had them in this house, there was always just enough wire in the existing structure to move the plugs out 2 inches without any problem, 2.5 inches without any problem. But you may run into a case in an older home where they ran just enough wire where you may have to do some extensions and maybe do some rewiring or something like that. But the point is, it's a really great faster solution than studding out a wall, adding insulation, sheetrocking it. That's a pretty time-consuming process. But just keep in mind, there is a good amount of preparation that takes place to make this work. When you spend the time to do it right, you know, learn from my mistakes on this. That's the real point of this video, is some of the things that I spent a lot of time looking for, you know, the right boxes for outlets, single and 2 gang, when and how to build out around windows and doors to make sure that they're going to be flush with the InSoFast. All of those things, I wanted to help you not make the same mistakes I did. So anyway, I hope this video has been helpful. Have a great day.